She thought I was broken. She thought I hadn't noticed how her glances had become cold and her phone calls quiet. They planned my downfall at a charity event that I had paid for. They didn't know that I never play games whose rules I can't change. They wanted to take my company away from me. I let them try. The applause felt distant. Mark Walsh maintained a neutral expression, shaking another donor's hand. His grip was solid, but his focus was tracking the time. 9:14 p.m. Across the grand ballroom, Janice, his wife, was captivating the mayor. Brian, his business partner, remained at her side. They shared a private glance, a fleeting micro-expression of conspiracy. They believed him oblivious. They mistook his predictability for a flaw he had spent 3 weeks carefully cultivating. He needed to get to the executive suite. He intercepted Janice between conversations. I require the executive override key. I left the donor pledge files on my desk. Janice performed a perfect sigh of marital patience. Mark, really? Tonight of all nights? Brian stepped in, placing a hand on Janice's arm. I've got it, January. You stay with our guests. He turned to Mark, pulling the heavy key card from his own pocket. He handed it over with a pat on Mark's shoulder that was pure condescension. Don't get lost, boss. They had just handed him the very access he required. Mark bypassed the main elevators, using the staff corridor. The executive floor was silent. He entered his office without activating the lights, the city's ambient glow providing just enough visibility. He moved directly to the large desk that bore his name. From an inner jacket pocket, he retrieved a microtransmitter no larger than a coin. He pressed it into the dense cable management recess beneath the desktop. It was invisible to a visual sweep, but positioned perfectly to capture clear audio. He activated the feed on a secure, secondary device. The connection established instantly. Battery, 72 hours. More than sufficient. He returned to the gala in under 4 minutes. Mark re-entered the ballroom as the charity auction began. He procured a glass of water and positioned himself near the back of the room, drawing his primary phone. To any observer, he was just a distracted husband checking market figures. In his right ear, a single, high-fidelity wireless bud relayed the audio from his office. He watched the bidding escalate as he heard his office door lock. He's such a ghost, Janice's voice transmitted, sharp and clear. A faint rustle of clothing. That forgotten files routine. I almost felt sorry for him. Brian's voice, deeper and arrogant. Mark raised his auction paddle, placing a $10,000 bid on a children's literacy program. His expression remained placid. Stop it, Janice murmured. We need to finalize this. The emergency board meeting is set for Friday. Your anonymous tip regarding the Cayman accounts is ready? Sealed and delivered, Brian confirmed. The board will panic. We present the financial malfeasance evidence, the data he conveniently left unsecured on the server. Mark offered a polite nod to a woman who recognized him from a financial journal. It's not enough, Janice insisted. A suspension is useless. I need the morality clause invoked. That is the only path to seizing his founder's shares. It has to be airtight. I'm working on it. We just need one public scandal. One credible accusation. This is Chicago. It's not difficult to find someone willing to talk for a price. Good. He's built his reputation on being reliable. He won't even comprehend what's happening until his name is being scraped off the building. The connection clicked silent. The door opened. They were gone. Mark Walsh lowered his device. The auctioneer's voice faded. He now possessed the full architecture of their plan. They thought he was too trusting. They assumed he was breaking. They had no idea he was simply collecting the blueprint for their own destruction. They wanted to take Logo's dynamics. He would let them try. The performance began the next morning. Mark initiated a senior management meeting and intentionally arrived 4 minutes late, a deliberate breach of his own rigid protocol. He fumbled with his tablet, failing to connect to the projector. Apologies, the figures aren't loading. Brian assumed control instantly. Allow me, Mark. I have the Q3 projections here. He projected his own screen, his voice confident, subtly taking ownership of the room. Mark retreated to his chair, appearing defeated, and visibly rubbed his temples. He allowed a tremor, just barely perceptible, to enter his hand as he picked up a coffee cup. He saw the senior VPs exchange worried glances. The narrative of his breakdown was taking root. That evening, he escalated the deception. He left his primary laptop on the kitchen island, unlocked. The screen displayed a spreadsheet detailing numerous offshore wire transfers. The file was named Cayman_contingency. He went to the patio, monitoring the kitchen via a discrete security feed on his secondary device. Janice entered, retrieved a glass of wine, and froze. She glanced toward the patio, then quickly photographed the laptop screen with her phone. The bait was taken. The emotional checkmate, however, came from his daughter. Olivia found him in his home study. She had been crying. Her voice was thick with fabricated concern. "Dad, I think something terrible is happening." Mark turned, schooling his features into a mask of weary concern. He already knew. Security logs from the gala showed her 15-minute conversation with Brian near the service entrance. "What is it, Liv?" I overheard Mom on the phone with Brian. They were talking about the board meeting. They said you've been moving money, that you're unstable." She gripped his arm. "I know it's not true. They're framing you. I can help." This was the moment. The betrayal he had confirmed now manifested as a plea for trust. "How?" "My major is in data security. I know the logo's architecture. If they're planting evidence on the servers, I can find it. I can run a trace. But I need high-level administrative access. The kind you never give out." He acted relieved. Pulling her into an embrace, she did not return with equal force. "You are the only one I can count on." He walked to his terminal, typed, and handed her a slip of paper. "This is a ghost key. It will give you access to the core server. Find whatever they've planted." Olivia pocketed the credentials. "I won't let you down, Dad." She left. Mark watched her go, his expression hardening. The access key was real, but it did not lead to the core server. It led to Honeypot Zero, a mirrored, isolated decoy environment he and a trusted contact had built the week prior. It was populated with layers of convincing, wholly fabricated data trails. She would discover exactly the evidence Brian and Janice needed her to find, all while her every keystroke was logged. An hour later, Mark drove to an unmarked data haven in an industrial park. He was met by Castillo, his ex-Army cybersecurity chief. "She's in," Mark stated, bypassing pleasantries. "The honeypot is live," Castillo confirmed, not looking up from a bank of monitors. "She is currently accessing the Cayman_contingency breadcrumbs. She's good, but she's arrogant." "Is the primary protocol active?" Castillo nodded. "The Trojan horse is complete. Logos Dynamics is now officially a shell entity. All intellectual property, client contracts, and liquid assets were successfully migrated to Logos Resilient Holdings via blockchain ledger 48 hours ago. The entity they are attempting to seize is worthless. They are fighting over an empty box," Mark clarified. "A box with a trigger," Castillo corrected. "The moment Brian or Janice attempts to use their new administrative privileges to access the actual financial core, which they will on Friday, it initiates an irreversible, anonymous security alert to the SEC and the FBI's Economic Crimes Division. The alert packet contains everything. Your gala recording, the offshore transfers they made, the logs from Olivia's breach." Mark looked at the screen, watching his daughter's cursor move through the trap he had set. They wanted a scandal. They wanted to invoke the morality clause. Let them. The emergency board meeting convened at 10 a.m. sharp. The atmosphere in the main conference room was suffocating. Mark sat isolated at the far end of the long table, the other directors maintaining a deliberate distance. Brian stood at the head, projecting an air of grave authority. Janice sat beside him, the picture of a wife forced into an impossible position. "As this session dictates," Brian began, his voice resonating with false regret, "we must address the catastrophic, immediate risk facing Logos Dynamics. We have uncovered substantial, undeniable evidence of financial malfeasance, directly tied to our CEO and founder." He projected the Cayman_contingency spreadsheet. Multi-million-dollar transfers to unauthorized, undocumented offshore accounts. Brian clicked to the next slide. And here, a data security report, bravely compiled by Olivia Walsh herself, detailing the backdoor server access points used to facilitate these shadow transactions. Olivia, seated in the back row, accepted the quiet nods of gratitude from the directors. She looked at her father with a flawless performance of pity. This behavior, coupled with Mr. Walsh's recent instability, Brian continued, gesturing toward Mark, paints a clear, disturbing picture. We are left with no choice. I move to invoke Section 4A of the corporate bylaws, the morality clause. I call for the immediate removal of Mark Walsh and the forfeiture of his founder's shares to stabilize and protect this company. Janice spoke, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. With the heaviest heart, I reluctantly second the motion. The chairman turned his gaze to Mark. "Mr. Walsh, do you have any response to these allegations?" Mark stood. The room held its breath. He did not look at the data on the screen. He looked directly at Brian. A compelling presentation. The data Olivia found is indeed accurate. He paused, letting the statement hang. Accurate, in that it exists precisely as I intended it to. Confusion rippled through the directors. You have presented your evidence, Mark said, interfacing his secondary device with the main projector. Allow me to present mine. This audio was captured in my office during the charity gala. Please listen carefully. He pressed play. The high-fidelity speakers filled the silent room with Janice's voice. I need the morality clause invoked. That is the only path to seizing his founder's shares. It was followed immediately by Brian's reply. I'm working on it. We just need one public scandal. One credible accusation. Janice's face went white. Brian shot to his feet. This is illegally obtained. This is fabricated. He's lost his mind. Is it? Mark's tone was glacial. The projection changed again, now showing a complex financial diagram. While my daughter was busy in the honeypot server I created for her, my real security chief was tracking your activities. A new set of financials appeared, detailing different wire transfers. These are your offshore transfers, Brian. To shell accounts under Janice's maiden name. You weren't framing me. You were running your own exit strategy. Brian, visibly sweating, dropped into his chair and began typing furiously at his laptop. I'm locking him out. I'm initiating a security override. You're trying to access the financial core, aren't you? Mark asked. The real one? Go ahead, please. Brian hit the enter key. The projector screen went black. A heavy, authoritative knock echoed through the room. The boardroom doors opened. Not security. 2 men and a woman in dark, federal-issue suits entered, badges displayed. We received an anonymous, encrypted security alert from this network, the lead agent announced, her voice cutting through the tension, detailing conspiracy to commit wire fraud and market manipulation. The agents moved with practiced efficiency. One placed a hand on Brian's shoulder, stopping his typing. The other approached Janice. Brian Keller, Janice Walsh, you are under arrest. As they were cuffed, Janice stared at Mark, her face a mask of violent disbelief. You did this. Mark ignored her. His gaze locked onto his daughter, who was paralyzed by the back wall, her escape route blocked. You were right there in the chat log, Liv, he said, his voice just loud enough for her to hear over the commotion. He's too trusting, you typed. Remember? Olivia's face crumpled. She understood, finally, that the trap had never been for him. The heavy conference room door clicked shut as the federal agents escorted Brian and Janice into the hall. An agonizing silence descended, broken only by the quiet hum of the projector. The remaining directors stared at the empty chairs, then at Mark. Harris, the chairman, finally spoke, his voice strained. Mark, we were misled. We had no idea of this conspiracy. Mark did not acknowledge the apology. He moved to the head of the table, the position of power now undeniably his. The entity you just attempted to dismantle, Logos Dynamics, is a hollow corporation. It has been for a week. He toggled the projection, displaying the charter for Logos Resilient Holdings. The intellectual property, all liquid assets, and every client contract are secure under this new, private entity. Your vote today was irrelevant theater. My theater. His gaze shifted to the back of the room. Olivia was still pressed against the wall, her path blocked by the third agent. Her fabricated concern had shattered, replaced by raw panic. What about her? Director Harris asked, his tone uncertain. The lead agent looked at Mark. She utilized fraudulent credentials to access a secure network and conspired to exfiltrate proprietary data. She is party to the fraud. Mr. Walsh, do you wish to press charges? Olivia's breathing was shallow. This was the true fulcrum of the day. He had eliminated the corporate threat. Now he had to manage the personal fallout. No. The single word surprised everyone. Olivia's relief was so potent, it was almost audible. She is not a corporate employee, Mark stated, his voice devoid of emotion. She did not breach federal financial statutes. She breached family trust. That is a private, internal matter. The agent nodded curtly. As you wish. The agent gestured to Olivia. You are free to go. Olivia did not hesitate. She pushed past the agent and fled the room, never looking back. The door closed again. Harris cleared his throat. Mark, this new holdings entity, that is entirely yours. Correct, Mark replied, already interfacing with the terminal. The previous corporate structure is dissolved. The company you believed you worked for no longer exists. My new operation, however, requires a functional board. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the pale faces. Your positions are not guaranteed. I am restructuring, effective immediately. You will each receive notifications by end of day regarding your future, or your redundancy. He arrived home hours later. The house was cold and still. He found Olivia in her bedroom, frantically shoving items into a duffel bag. She flinched when he entered. They took Mom, she whispered. They took an accomplice, Mark corrected. Dad, I didn't. Brian forced me. He said you were unstable, he said. Stop. The command was absolute, cutting her off. I possess the complete server logs, Olivia. From week 1. Your words were, he's too trusting. You gambled on the wrong side. She collapsed onto the bed, the performance finally over. What are you going to do to me? I already did it. I declined to pursue federal charges. A flicker of desperate hope surfaced. So, I can stay? Mark walked to her desk. He picked up a small, framed photo of them from years prior. He placed it face down. No, you are an adult. You made an adult decision. You will now face the consequences. He slid a single document across the desk. This is the dissolution notice for your trust fund. It is nullified. All assets within it have been irrevocabodied and are being redirected to the logo's resilient, charitable wing. You can't, she shrieked, lunging for the paper. That's my money. It was my money, he stated. A privilege. You proved yourself unworthy of it. He retrieved a plain white card from his pocket. This is the address of a dormitory at Chicago City College. Their registration is still open for night classes. She stared at the card, horrified. You're throwing me out? With nothing? I am giving you exactly what you earned, a new start. You wanted to build your own future outside of my shadow. Begin. He turned and walked out of the room, not waiting for a reply, the sound of her subsequent collapse lost in the long, empty hallway. 18 months later, Logo's resilient holdings was the new standard in data security. The financial press had mythologized the Logo's purge, a clinical corporate restructuring that left competitors stunned by its audacity and precision. Mark Walsh was no longer a footnote. He was the headline. He stood on the main stage at the Midwest Strategic Forum, delivering the closing address. His presence filled the auditorium, a stark contrast to the man who once faded into the background. We are taught that predictability is a virtue, he began, his voice amplified in the silence. That stability is the bedrock of partnership. This is an incomplete truth. He surveyed the audience, 1,000 executives watching his every move. Structure is not about comfort. It is about defense. True power is not about weathering an assault. It's about designing the fortress so well that the assault becomes a strategic impossibility. He never mentioned his personal life. The courts had handled that. Janice and Brian, facing an avalanche of irrefutable evidence, had accepted plea bargains. They were serving concurrent sentences for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Their assets were seized, their names erased from the corporate ledger. They were ghosts of a different, more pathetic kind. He concluded his speech. Do not seek to be liked. Do not strive to be understood. Strive, instead, to be necessary. Build your foundations on rock, and when those who rely on sand come for what is yours, do not negotiate. Do not rage. Simply, let the tide do its work. Thank you. The ovation was immediate and thunderous. Mark gave a single, curt nod and exited, bypassing the reception line. He took a private elevator to the building's sublevel. Castillo was waiting. The car is ready, sir. As Mark approached, Castillo handed him a simple manila envelope that had arrived via courier. This came to the office. No return address. Mark opened it inside the vehicle as it pulled into traffic. It was a graduation announcement from the Chicago City College. Olivia Walsh, Associate of Science, with honors. Below the formal print, she had written 2 words in simple, block letters. Step 1. He studied the card for a long moment. It was not an apology. It was not a plea. It was a statement. A data point. It signaled the beginning of a long, arduous climb from the 0 point he had enforced. A decade of work, perhaps, to prove she was not her mother, to demonstrate she was not her past. Mark felt no anger. He felt no pride. It was simply information. He slid the card back into the envelope. File this, he said, handing it to Castillo. Under. Potential interns. 2028. Castillo glanced at him in the rearview mirror, registering the implications. We reward resilience, Castillo, Mark stated, his gaze already fixed on the evening skyline, his mind processing the next objective. But we never, ever, forget the original data. He did not look back. The phantom was gone. The strategist remained.